It's going down. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So we're finally getting around to installing the Powertrix coilovers into the Z31 Turbo. And if you're here for the first time, check out my playlist because I have over 20 somewhat odd episodes of me building this car up to its current point. But here recently, we've installed polyurethane bushings throughout the whole chassis, and I wanted the best coilovers for the car. I reached out to a lot of Z31 owners, and just about everybody I talked to had nothing but great things to say about Powertrix. So I decided that's what I was going to go with. But then Charles Park, the owner of Powertrix, he got in touch with me and he offered me a killer discount on a set of coilovers and is sponsoring this episode. So I thought that was very cool indeed. I decided to go with it. But speaking about the Powertrix coilovers, they offer two different versions. They offer the RT and the UL. The RT, from what I understand, is the road track, and the UL is the ultralights. I decided to go with the ultralights because it's like the name states, they are lighter, about 2 to 3 pounds lighter than the RTs, and that's unsprung weight. And when we're talking about unsprung weight, you know, that 2 to 3 pounds is multiplied 2 to 3 times greater under driving, you know, normal driving to spirited driving conditions. So 6 to 9 pounds per corner is what the ultralights will save you over the other ones. And you might ask, well, what benefits does that give you? Well, the benefits you'll get is a more agile cornering experience because it's less mass, less weight, and also it saves components on your suspension like your ball joints, your in and out of tie rods, and your bushings. So that was enough to sell me on the ULs. And on top of that, the ULs offer a 10% greater size dampener inside of it as opposed to the RTs, and that right there was enough to sell me. Now, they do sell Swift springs as an upgrade. I decided to go with the standard springs, and even though they're standard springs, you get to choose the spring rate that the spring rate that you want to go with. And I talked to him about the spring rates, and what we decided on was 8 kg in the front, 6 kg in the rear, and that's going to be stiff enough for spirited sport driving, but yet soft enough to not beat the shit out of your kidneys while you're driving up and down the road as a normal driver. And that was enough to sell me on that as well. So we're going to see how well that works out on this, but I do dig the coilover. I think it is a very nice piece indeed. It does have an upper aluminum pillow ball mount right here, and it gives you camber adjustment. Now, they do have the adjuster on a cable down below right here that goes through a slot on the sleeve. Most of your coilovers have the adjustable, you know, dial up on top, but these have them right here on the bottom, and the rears actually have them up on top. So that's pretty cool. I thought that was, you know, different than a lot of what you normally see. And above all, I just can't wait to drive it and see exactly how it feels. So this is the normal shock strut assembly here. Now, unfortunately, these are not bolt in. They have to be welded in the front because you have to utilize the front knuckle to work with the coilover. And the only way to do that basically is cut the sleeve. So we're going to have to disassemble this all down to the bare knuckle, cut it, prep it, and then we're going to weld the sleeves on. And then after that, we'll get to installing everything. So that was a mouthful. Man, let's go ahead and start it. All right, guys, so I basically got the strut assemblies out of the car already, and the reason for that being is because we redid all the suspension, but to get these out to this point is relatively easy. You have 3 mounting studs right here, and those go through the shock tower right there. So you can undo those. Then you have 2 mounting bolts on the bottom right here that connect to the ball joint and the steering angle bracket. You want to take those off, but before you do that, you want to take off the caliper bracket, and the rotor. And then after you get to that point, you can take off the 2 bolts that secure the strut to the ball joint assembly. So we're at that point now. We're going to go ahead and strip these down. So before I start stripping things down, we got to get the tops off of it and the springs. I got the air compressor aired up. We're going to go ahead and hit that. And then after that, we'll remove the shock cartridges and then get the hubs and the shields off. So before I go ripping the nut off of the top hat, I got strut spring compressor tools on each side of the spring, compressing the spring down enough. So that is going to keep me safe from the tension releasing on the spring once I take that nut off. You can get these at any AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts or O'Reilly's like that. They rent them out, but I always keep me, you know, a set on hand, and you can rent them and return them and get your money back. So definitely you want to do this to just make sure that you're safe in the process of taking these apart. But let's go ahead now, take these off and get it all stripped down. So we're going to pull the shock cartridge out, and basically I put some WD-40 inside the threads right here. This is a top cap. Basically it looks like this right here, because I already got one out. That is what the shock cartridge itself looks like. Now I use a vise to hold it in place. I use a big adjustable wrench, and basically that's what I do in order to get these out. Sometimes if it gives you a hard time, you got to use a hammer with the adjustable wrench, and that will give it some motivation to break loose. But these aren't rusted up or weathered in any way, and these shocks have been replaced not too long ago, so it shouldn't be too hard to get them out like I did that one there. So let's go ahead and do this. So I got the first knuckle assembly stripped down, and it's pretty simple to do. Now basically I use my chisel to take the cap off. Then after that you're going to go ahead and remove the carter clip. After you remove the carter clip, then you'll be able to take this piece off that covers the nut. Then you remove the nut, then the washer, and then you can pull this off. And after you pull that off, it keeps the bearings and everything in with the seal on the back, and it will expose the 3 Phillips screws that mount the shield. Then you can take that out, and pretty much you're up to this point. I'll put it in time lapse and show you guys the process. So on the Powertrix coilovers, you're going to need this bracket right here off of this assembly, and basically you have 2 spot welds. You go ahead and drill those out, and you use the chisel like you saw me do, and you get it off that way. Now that's going to have to be cleaned up and weld it to the sleeves on the coilovers, because it actually holds the brake line to the back of it right here. So it's an option. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. You can use a zip tie, but I just want it to be, you know, close to OEM, have a nice solid mount, so I went ahead and did that. So now that we got this done, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to measure about how far of a distance it is between that slot on the sleeve and the bottom of it. I'm going to make a mark, and I'm going to use my Sawzall, and I'm just going to chop it, and then from there we'll just clean it up and get it ready for welding. So looking at the bottom sleeve right here, this portion of it right there is basically an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and make a marking on the assembly right here for an inch, and then I'm going to go ahead and chop it and do the same with the other side, clean them up, and then they'll be ready to be welded. So looking at the knuckle, the sleeve that I cut, as you can see on the bottom of it, it actually comes down and is slimmer on the bottom, and the sleeve itself has a little lip on the inside, and it does not quite slide over it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my angle grinder right here with the grinding disc. I'm going to go ahead and grind around the top and see if it will relieve it enough that I can slide the sleeve over. That way we can go ahead and weld it. Okay guys, so I got it all ground down, and what I ended up using was a wire brush wheel on the angle grinder like that, and I went ahead and I got mostly all of the powder coat off of the knuckle around the area where we're actually going to be TIGging, and I got it ground down enough and clean that the sleeve now slides over it. And I don't want to push it all the way down because there is a little bit of friction around that lip. So I'm going to have to take, you know, just a little piece of wood and a hammer just to hit it over there, and that'll secure it nice and tight. And then we'll be able to TIG around there and have good penetration with the powder coat being rubbed off. So that's what you're up against with these sleeves. It's not a big deal. Just take your time and do it right, and the results will come out great. So one thing I noticed whenever I put the sleeve onto the knuckle is this piece right here, it doesn't sit flush like the rest of the knuckle does, so it makes the sleeve wiggle. So we're going to grind down this part right here, so when we put the sleeve on, it's going to be nice and flush, so we can get a nice TIG weld around the surface right there. All right, so we got that part of the knuckle ground down, and we have a clamp securing the sleeve to the knuckle so that once we start TIG welding around it, it will not move. So it is good to go at this point. Now we're gonna go ahead and TIG it up. Alright guys, so I got the first coilover in, and I had to do a little bit of an extra step because the length of the coilover with the bump steer spacer made it just a little bit too long. So basically what I did is I took two nuts and I fastened it down so the coilover would not fall out. I then raised the vehicle and put my weight on a lower control arm to get the clearance to slide it over the steering angle bracket. And the reason for that being is because I got this strut rod and the sway bar connected. So it was just a little bit added step, not a big deal. I got it in there, it's looking sweet. And then I had to relocate these bolts for the camber plates on the inside because it was just interfering right here with the strut tower. So I got them in this position for now, and then once I start adjusting camber, I'll get the sweet spot and then widen the bolts at that point. But it is good to go at this point. I'm going to go ahead and install the other coilovers, and then we'll get to the hubs and rotors and all that stuff. So now we're going to go ahead and install the rear coilovers, and we're going to remove the two speakers and see exactly what we got to take apart. But I'm pretty sure we're going to have to take apart most of the trim pieces on each side in order to gain access to the nuts on top mounting the rear shock. So we're going to go ahead and do that and get to installing the rear coilovers. Alright guys, so I was able to get those coilovers installed without removing any of the interior pieces, and that is a good thing. I just gained access through the speaker holes, and I used these combination of tools right here in order to get the job done. A 14mm combo wrench, a 14mm stubby ratchet, a 1/4 ratchet, 3/8 ratchet, 6-inch extensions on both, and wobble extension with the 14mm socket, and on the 3/8 I had a 14mm wobble socket. With this combination of tools, I was able to loosen them, take them off, tighten them down as well, and get them nice and tight. So we're good to go on that. I did use the factory reinforcement plates. So the coilovers are done now in the back, so we need to get on to making our height adjustments and preload adjustments, and then after that we're just going to see how sexy this thing looks in the air. Alright guys, so we got the suspension installed. Now it's time to set the preload and the ride height, and I'm going to try to describe this as best I can. I am by no means an expert in this, but I've done it enough to know it works, so let me describe this as best I can. I always like to start with the preload of the spring, and the preload is basically the tension of the spring at rest, and the way you want to do that is you want to make sure that this bottom spanner nut right here is loose, because this one locks this in place. And what you want to do basically is you want to take your spanner wrench and you want to turn it this way, and this way will run the spanner nut up, causing more tension on the spring. And I like to do that until it feels, you know, a little bit of resistance, and that's where I like to start with. And then once I get enough resistance to where I like it, I lock this one in place. Then I take a tape measure and I measure between this spanner nut here and the top plate on top of the spring, and that'll give me a general idea of what to do on the other side. I'll run it up the same, make sure the measurement's about the same, make sure the spanner nut feels about the same, and then from there I do the same to all four corners, and that's my preload. And then from there you want to go from the bottom right here, and now with these two locked in place nice and tight, you'll be able to you have to loosen this one. This one locks the body to the sleeve, so make sure that's loose. And then from there, if you want to lower it, you would go from the top spanner nut this way, and that would thread it into the sleeve, lowering it. Or if you wanted to raise it, you go from the bottom one right here, and you go that way, and that would move the body of it out of the sleeve, and that would raise it. And then once you think you got the sweet spot on that, you would tighten this bottom one, locking the body to the sleeve, and then you would take your measurement here to here and do the same on the other side, making sure the measurement's about the same. Then you would lower the vehicle down, see exactly where it sits, and then make your adjustments from there, because over time bodies kind of tweak and whatnot, so you just kind of have to eyeball it, and it's just a little tedious process. You have to drive the vehicle over time too, and because suspension settles over time. But this is just the starting point, and always get your car aligned after you do something like this. I will have my vehicle aligned this coming week, but this is just to start out with. So let me go ahead, do this, and I'll show you guys the end result. Alright guys, so I got the preload and the ride height successfully done, but I ran into a little bit of an issue while I was doing that. And if you can see the coilover in the tire right there, it is actually interfering and rubbing. So to remedy that, I went ahead and got online and I ordered some wheel spacers for the front and rear, and that's going to actually bring the tires out closer to the fender edge, give it a cleaner look. And I went with 15mm on the front and 30mm spacers on the rear, so it's actually going to look pretty good. It's going to fill up that wheel well area, and it's going to look a lot cleaner. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to drive the vehicle and do a review of it on this episode. It's going to have to wait till the next episode, but not a big deal. More content for you guys to watch. I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel back on right here, and I'm also going to lower it down and show you guys how sexy it looks in the end. All right, guys, so I hope you all enjoyed this episode of me installing the Powertrix UL coilovers into the Z31 Turbo. And if you're in the market for some coilovers for your ride, definitely check out powertrix.com. I'm sure they'll have what you need to hook you up. But it is unfortunate that we had that clearance issue with the coilovers and the tires. And I do believe that the bump steer spacer that I installed, its 11mm offset, has something to contribute to that. I can't say for sure, but that's just kind of the way I feel about it. But we'll get those spacers installed on the next episode. I'll do some more camber adjustments, get things worked out a little bit better so we can take this thing on its first rip with those coilovers, and I can't wait to see how it's gonna feel with those polyurethane bushings I installed in it as well. So we got that to look forward to on the next episode. And if you're here for the first time and you're digging my content, go ahead and subscribe. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers and we're almost there. It's been a long time coming. I do put in a lot of work into these episodes and I try to make them enjoyable and informative as can be. So with that being said, guys, I'm all done. Y'all know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will definitely see you guys on the next episode.